Citation to accompany the award of Joint Service Commendation Medal to Master Sergeant Toby J. Pruitt, USAF. Master Sergeant Toby J. Pruitt, United States Air Force, distinguished himself by exceptionally meritorious achievement as Air Transportation Special Project Officer and Air Transportation Specialist for a joint task force in support of overseas contingency operations from 11 July 2020 to 5 November 2020. During this period, Master Sergeant Pruitt was instrumental in coordinating the movement of sensitive cargo, resulting in the embarkation of a forward operating camp and vehicle assets valued at hundreds of thousands of dollars. His professionalism and attention to detail allowed him to ensure the accountability of thousands of dollars in critical portable scales. Additionally, he coordinated with airfield management, air terminal operations personnel, and other joint task force personnel at different outstations to ensure the movements of vital surveillance devices valued at hundreds of thousands of dollars were completed without interruptions. He was pivotal during the retrograding of one outstation living quarter and additional warehouse storage items, moving household furniture with a net weight of 10 tons valued at $42,000, which resulted in an additional annual savings of $30,000. The distinctive accomplishments of Master Sergeant Pruitt reflected great credit upon himself, the United States Air Force, and the Department of Defense.
I was glad that I had a deck in order to give out, and I was especially glad that it was a joint deck. I get to talk up the 913 quite a bit, and one of the things I like to do is talk about our scope. We might be a relatively small unit, we might be a TFI partner of a larger one, but our scope is pretty broad. And to be able to give out a joint award to one of our airmen, I think is a big deal, because it shows how far our reach is, and it shows that we are actively helping not just the 19th, not just Team Little Rock, but downrange with combatant commands in missions that affect the nation's needs and desire. Next, please. The room isn't full. Where is everybody? We're not limited by capacity in the room or COVID, and that's nice. It's finally starting to come to an end. But commander's call is important, so is flying. So is medical readiness, so is some unique training opportunities like we're getting in APS to work with C-130Hs and Js and work with the Air Guard. To that end, I appreciate everyone who had the availability to come here to hear me in person, but it's going to be made available via recording and some few other means so that I'm able to get this information out by getting as much done as I possibly can. There are a few things that I won't do on a UTA. One of those is I will not cancel flying, and I will not cancel training that's available on only a few opportunities. So I have to accept fewer people in the room, but small price to pay, and we have other means to get this information out. So that's why there are fewer in the room than we have. Next, please. I wanted to roll up the last year and do it in a timely manner in terms of accomplishments. And the things that we've been able to do as a small unit in a short amount of time when COVID has been going on has been significant. When I first arrived, the unit did not have an aviation deployment on the calendar and did not have a rotational deployment. That's set now, thanks to the efforts of AMC and AFRIC and the efforts of the people in this room who pushed for getting the unit into the fight and showing AFRIC, AMC, and the Air Force what we're capable of. And that's a huge deal. The Air Force frequently operates on what have you done for me lately, and because we've been proactive and gotten work done this year, I can point to what have you done for me lately, for the NAT, for AFRIC, for the Air Force. Full-time manning. We depend on all of our staff. And the full-time corps obviously works Monday to Friday to make sure that the TRs are supported so that we can get more work done and get more training done. due to various factors, the economy is probably a big player. We are very high on our full-time manning right now, and it allows us to get more done and better support the TRs. That's a big deal because we need the ability in order to get things done. We carry a lot of vacancies. I'll talk about that in a minute. But full-time manning is a high point, and I appreciate the efforts of people who made sure that these jobs were advertised and referring people if they had someone that they knew, or working hard in order to keep the process going as we advertise positions and onboard folks. Working through COVID. Everyone has had to work through COVID in some way. What you probably don't see all the time, that I get to see a lot in dealing with the staff, is the staff's not at work. The closer you are to the Pentagon, the less you show up to get things done. And I find it extremely frustrating when I call the NAF or I call AFRIC and it doesn't answer, or I send an email and I get told to call someone home because they're teleworking. I understand why that was important for some folks and why it was important immediately when COVID started to happen. But I wanted to lean forward, and we came back in person in the August UTA, one of the first units to come back in. And I understand that there are going to be some people that doesn't make sense for, but I wanted to drive us to in-person because I think that allows us on a whole to get more done. And I appreciate people being willing to do that and making it so that we're getting more training and getting more mission objectives done. Rally in the Valley and Rally in the Rockies. This was predominantly aviation-centric, but it's an example of how the 913 punches above its weight. The rally exercises were the brainchild of General Healy. And what he wanted to do was create flag-level exercises in 22nd Air Force that he could expand to the other NAFs and to other places in Africa. And the planning effort for the first and second of those exercises were driven by our people. And this year, the exercise that Major Hainsfurther and his team have come up with truly rivals what ACC does at Nellis and what other organizations do in other flag exercises. And General Healy gets to see that because we're delivering what he wants, training for the entire NAF, training for elements of 10th Air Force and 4th Air Force as well. We're also pulling in, assuming we get funding, joint partners from Marine Corps and Army. It's a big deal, and that's being driven by the people here. CCIP is Commander's Inspection Program, and being inspected is never an easy event. But I have a responsibility, as all commanders do, to inspect their unit. And with IG and IGI's help, with WIT's help, we've been able to look into our own units, revitalize IGEMs, revitalize MICT, find problems and resolve them ourselves. That might not sound like a big deal, but fixing our own problems is extremely important and is the basis of how the Air Force does inspections. If you don't have an inspection program and an ability to solve your own problems, you will not pass inspections. Units fail for that in Africa all the time. So I appreciate that work, and it's something to be proud of. Our TFI relationship. It hasn't always been positive. Units change over time, personalities change over time. What I'm happy to report is my relationship with Colonel Shuddy is extremely strong. I think the relationships are strong throughout all the groups in the 19th and throughout all our squadrons. And that doesn't just have a nice-to-have feeling that we're getting along with everyone. It produces results. Because when the 19th asks us for assistance, if that relationship is strong, we find ways to help them. Because that's the right thing to do, and that's how I want to run the unit. We will operate in a manner that benefits everyone. Conversely, when we need help, the 19th answers the call and helps us. And if I wanted to take more time, I could rattle off 24 areas where the relationship is better and where each unit is helping the other. But if you interact with the 19th on a daily basis or less frequently, I appreciate that work, and it's important because we're getting more done for T Little Rock, and it's a benefit to both units. Process improvement. Chief Henjum is well known for being Chief Henjum, but in a civilian capacity, he helps me be more efficient. and identify ways to do things better. And a lot of that work has happened behind the scenes, but it doesn't get a lot of play, but it makes us more efficient. And another area it shows up is when I did strategic alignment with leadership back in September. Out of that, it's a fancy name for a meeting. Out of that meeting, we came up with specific programs that we wanted to do to make the unit better. And those things have improved the situation in every area that we have looked at, with the exception of manning overall that I'll talk about in a minute. Next slide, please. While full-time manning is good, overall manning in the unit is a problem. And I love taking a victory lap and talk about our accomplishments, but I also have to be honest and acknowledge places where I have failed. Accomplishments are due to your work. Failures are a result of me not putting resources in the right place, not putting focus in the right place. So expect to work on these over the next year as we try to identify areas to make the unit better. Overall manning, we have 450 positions. We have about 360 people. And we are able to get the job done day to day. We are able to meet our deployment responsibilities, but it comes at a cost because the people who are here have to make up for vacancies where there is no one. And our readiness reporting reflects the fact that we have so many vacancies. So that is an area that I plan to work on across the next year. COVID may not have gotten in our way in terms of getting AFSC training, flying training done. It definitely got in the way of our efforts to improve management. Financial management. I don't want you to think that we misuse money, because we don't. We're efficient with the money that we spend, and we spend it where it needs to be spent in a responsible way. But AFRIC makes it hard in how money comes to the unit. And this year was educational. The details aren't important, but working with the NAF and AFRIC, I think I could have been more clear for squadron commanders, more clear for individuals on how we executed our funds. The details aren't important. Money's always tight. But for a shining moment, for about a month, we were looking like it wasn't going to be so tight, but that changed. And I apologize for that, because that affects everyone's life. I told all the commanders to come up with ways to bring folks in and get more training done. And I was frustrated when I had to rescind that direction because that money wasn't there that I thought I was going to get. The April Super UTA. The Super UTA is not going to go away. It's still in April, and that's the way the unit has operated traditionally, and I see value in it. The last iteration, because I wasn't clear with my direction, did not turn out to work to be as good as I thought. Lieutenant Colonel Spaulding volunteered to look at that and come up with a better solution for next year. I know some units it worked out well, but there were some units that it didn't. I'm not going to say it was great because it wasn't. So I identified the problem, we solve it, we do something better for next year. Next, please. The future. We have deployments coming up, and we have an aviation deployment and an APS deployment next year. After some more work happens at the staff, the aviation deployment will get locked in a method that hopefully we'll find satisfactory, and that will continue in perpetuity. The APS schedule, that exists for years and years. That is extremely important because deployments are what we train to do, it's what we have to be ready for, and it's what we are going to execute when we're tasked to do so. And that's coming up in the next year. Agile combat support may or may not hit the unit because just the way scheduling works out. So I bring that up because you may not fly in a crew, you may not be a 2T2, but people get mobilized in AFRIC all the time. And I use the example of medical folks and how AFRIC and personnel from Reserve Command were mobilized in order to help with COVID. And General Scobie talked about this the other day in a meeting I called into. He was very proud of the fact that AFRIC mobilized some medical elements in a day. And it's not the expectation that people be ready to mobilize in a day. It is the expectation that you're ready. And if they were ready, it made that mobilization easier to happen. But just know you may not expect to deploy. There may not be a deployment on the horizon for your AFSC. That doesn't mean it can't happen. The unit had been in flux almost since its genesis. I know there's some people that have been here the whole time. And when I first arrived, I talked about this on my initial commander's call, Africa was actually looking at doing something different with the unit, closing it, remissioning it. With General Healy and General Scobie's help, that effort died, and it is not coming back. And recently I was up at AMC, and the AMC A5AA staff function, you don't have to worry about whether or not you know the acronym. They're the people that do all programming, so plans, budgeting, and they know that the 913th is going to exist and continuing to exist, and AMC is preparing to support the unit through the 19th Airlift Wing in perpetuity. So I'm confident in saying that the unit's future is bright. We're going to be here a long time, doing good work for the 19th, for Team Little Rock, and the nation. Our TFI, that is our future. And I firmly believe that working together with the 19th makes us better because we can leverage their strength, and them being able to draw on our reserve, unintended, helps them do more, get more done. And that's why the relationship is important, and that's why it's important that we drive to be more intertwined, strengthen that TFI over time to make sure that the units are performing in a way that make both better. Our manning, I hope, will continue to improve. Like I said, in the year that I've been here, we've been steady state. Same number out as we bring in. When Chief and I get to do newcomers, I never look to see how many are going to be there because I allow myself to believe that the room's going to be full. And that's not always the case. And we're getting by on about replacement rate. So I'm hoping over the next year, actions that we'll take are going to make that situation better. As COVID recedes and people aren't necessarily frozen in place, we're going to be able to monopolize on the fact that active duty is way overmanned. And people who normally would have separated or retired didn't because COVID was a factor for them. They stayed in place. I think we have the chance here to really improve our manning across the next year. Fitness assessments. I've talked about this with the commanders a lot, and I kept bringing it up, and General Brown kept moving to the right. It's not moving to the right anymore. Fitness assessments will start up again in July. We won't have UTA in July, so for us, fitness assessments will begin in August. If you are testing in August or September, October, I urge you, please do not blow it off. They're not going away. They're not going to be pushed to the right again. And the AFI is clear on what happens after each failure. And if the situation, if it becomes necessary, I will put people out over fitness assessment failures. Please prepare yourselves. I'm going to test on 1 July because July is my month, and it's just, I'll go with active duty. That way no one in the unit has to worry about testing. But you will see my score. It'll be outside the command center, or my offices, along with my readiness. So everyone's going to get to see, and I challenge you to outdo me. I do okay. I don't get 100. But please, do not blow that off. Next. Suicide prevention is an annual requirement. We have a lot of non-prior folks, maybe it's your first year. You're going to hear about this a lot, not just because the Air Force says so, but because it's important. And it's something that I take very seriously, and I look forward to the opportunity to talk about it and put my emphasis into the program. So please pay attention, even though, like I said, you've seen suicide awareness briefs. I'm going to add a certain amount of experience from my own career, and it'll illuminate some of why I feel so strongly about it. But there'll be a few keys here that I want to pull out, and Chief Wagner and I have talked about this. A lot of people might say, you know, at some point you're going to reach the lowest number of suicides you're going to get, and it's going to be 0. I'm going to be realistic. Across the Air Force, maybe it's not going to be 0. I get it, there's a lot of people in the Air Force. But I have stats here that on Little Rock, yeah, it could be 0. And that happens because people pay attention to the training and they're in a position to provide help or in a position to ask for help when it becomes necessary. Next slide. I wish I didn't have personal stories to relate, and I've talked about this with a few people. If you've heard it before, I apologize, you're going to hear it again. I use the actual airmen's names because I don't want you to think that this is something that I'm making up or something that I'm adding for emphasis. It's added for emphasis, but these are actual people. Pete Novinsky was a gunner on HA-6s. Most of my career was at rescue. And this was at Penn. He had gotten injured and was no longer able to fly. And if you've ever had to deal with LOD, you know it takes a long time. He'd been in the Air Force a long time. He'd been a gunner a long time. He loved his job. He was an excellent gunner. He was an excellent NCO. And frequently, folks, you know, they get toward the end and they know their career is winding down. They're racing towards some sort of medical retirement. They slack off. They don't really do work anymore. They just kind of hard time. But Pete, he looked for ways to contribute because, you know, his life was the job. His identity was the job. And he wasn't going to let his squadron down, so he did as much as he could. And what was interesting about him, 2 things. He was easily probably top 3 or 4 funniest people I have ever met. He was always happy. Came across him. His wit was sharp, the jokes were timely, and the other notable thing about him was he would whistle in a peculiar way that would sound like a bird. It would sound exactly like a bird. And every time he walked in a room, he would do it. It was just his thing. That's what he would do. After he'd been in the process of getting medically retired for a while, more than a year, folks noticed that he was down, and you know they asked him if he was okay, or wanted to make sure that he was all right. And he availed himself of some resources, but his situation kept getting worse, and he hit it. And one of the jobs that he had started doing, because he couldn't fly anymore, was he would sit op soup at the ops desk while the unit was flying. And he was there, I'd been day op soup, and I was down at the squadron for some reason, and I talked to him for a few minutes, and you know, he seemed okay. He was you know, down about leaving the Air Force, but his wife was happy, and he was trying to figure out what his next job was going to be. That night, he shot himself. 3 or 4 hours after I saw him. And he didn't have any kids, but he was married. His wife was in the house when he did it. And it affected the whole unit. And I think, in my opinion, it was a response to the fact that his whole adult life had been in the Air Force, and he couldn't transition. Wouldn't transition. He could, it's just he didn't see a way to do it. He didn't see a future. He didn't want to continue as not being in the Air Force. Truth is, at some point, we're all not going to be in the Air Force. And there were signs there that folks saw and tried to help, but maybe the difference was being more proactive. I'll talk later about things potentially we could have done. Ben Brown was a pilot, same unit. And he was on my last deployment with the 920. This was back in late 2019, early 2020. I was commander on the deployment, and I saw Ben Brown every day for the 160 odd days that we were there, because we had update brief every day. And he had some struggles when we were there. He was a TR pilot. His other life, he flew contract helicopters in Afghanistan. We were in Somalia. But he had a plan. He was transitioning to the airlines. He was going to fly for Envoy. He was already hired. And that was going to be his future because working contract in Afghanistan paid a lot, but it kept him away from his family for 6 months a year. While we were deployed, he had some trouble at home. I took him off the schedule so we could get things sorted out, and he was able to get those things fixed. And he executed the rest of the deployment beautifully. Like Pete, Ben was funny, and his humor was different. He would play little pranks on the guys, and it wasn't like nasty pranks, mean stuff. It was fun. And he did that throughout the deployment. And as he kept doing that, and kept talking about what the next job was going to be, and we were delayed in redeploying, he was concerned about his deployer, but we ended up leaving on time, it was going to be okay. I figured Ben was fine. So we got back and we were on R&R. Now he's out of pocket, because if you're on R&R, if your requirements are done, he was home, he lived locally, he was on leave, and he woke up one morning and shot us. And it turns out the stressors in his life were deeper than he let on, with just a cursory amount of questioning in terms of how he was doing. Next slide. The Air Force does a lot of research on why people want to hurt themselves. And a bunch of the slides are hidden. The data doesn't necessarily get to the good stuff that I'll get here in a minute in terms of how we actually deal with this. But relationship issues is always one of the more common. Both men had relationship issues. But to some extent, we all have relationship issues. If you're married, it's not necessarily always your spouse. If you're not married, it's not always necessarily your significant other. Maybe it's a relationship with your kids or your parents. We're in the reserve, we skew older. Maybe you have adult children. Those relationships are going to be different than if you have minor children. But all those could potentially be sources of stress. Financial issues, that was not a factor in either case. Legal issues, sure. Pete was trying to figure out how to get his LOD pushed. It's an administrative, there's legal aspects to that. Workplace, Ben was a pilot, no problem in his career. Pete his workplace was, he was being removed. Short missions, other unknown. The point of this is, these stressors tend to be common. And those are things that we can see, or we can find out about someone if we get involved and get across that threshold of, I don't want to get in someone's business, or I'm not comfortable talking to someone about something that either you may not want to talk about, or you may not think someone who you are worried about wants to talk about. Next slide, please. This is why I will not accept that you can not drive suicides to zero, at least on Little Rock Air Force Base, because we're at zero now. And like I said before, the Air Force is big, a lot of people, 600,000. I'm a realist. It may never get to zero for the Air Force as a whole. It's at zero for this base right now. And that's because largely people are looking out for their wingmen. I don't know if the term might be corny, but it's something that I think is germane. Because we all have friends in the unit, we all have people that we work with. We get to see folks on UTAs, on AT. If you're in other words, we get to see. And taking an interest and paying attention to that person to make sure they're okay, that is how we prevent suicide. Next. The H acronym has been around for some time. It's simple. The Air Force serves up a lot of acronyms. Most I can't remember. This one I can. Ask, care, escort. You have to get involved. If you think that someone is having a problem, it's not comfortable to get into their life, to try to get in there and ask questions. But if you don't ask, you might miss something. I missed something in Pete's life. his demeanor. I missed something in vent. And if I or other people in the unit had been more proactive, I think we could have avoided their suicide. What you ask is important. Don't start with, are you thinking of killing yourself? See how they are. But if you get concerned, you have to go to these questions because you have to face it. You don't want to talk around the topic as a means to make yourself more comfortable, or as a means to try to make the other person more comfortable. Face it. Be proactive. And someone may not answer the question, but maybe the way they answer it is a clue. Ask, do you have access to a firearm? This is not a judgment on gun ownership. This is just the fact that the means that people who commit suicide in the U.S., it's overwhelmingly a firearm. So just knowing if someone has one or not, maybe that goes into your judgment on whether or not you want to fear your way. Calmly control the situation. Being overly excited is going to potentially amplify a bad situation. Be calm. Actively listen. Well, what does that mean, actively listen? If you're just sitting there listening, it's pretty passive. No, not if you're leaning in, physically leaning in to what they have to say to hear. Or asking follow-up questions about what's going on. Showing that you care. Showing that you're trying to help. And then, if it's a situation where you need to remove an ability for someone to hurt themselves, do that. Be proactive. Lastly, escort. If you are concerned that someone is going to harm themselves, do not leave them alone. They may not want you to stay. But as long as you're not going to be in a situation that's going to hurt yourself, don't leave them alone. And there are resources that can help them. Next week. I'll get to those in a minute. But ACE works as a means to guide your efforts to help someone else. But maybe you can help yourself. And as I was preparing for this, I pulled together some information from some resources that will show up here in a minute in terms of where you can get information to help or seek help yourself. And I pulled these three things because it's stuff that I do for me. And so I wanted to make it more personal. Some of the stuff might seem cheesy, but I'll explain how I do it. Gratitude and looking for the good. I am a realist. And sometimes that comes across as pessimism, but I have to purposely look for the good sometimes. Because sometimes it's hard to find. And I wish it were the case that only good things happen to me, but sometimes bad things happen too. But the good is always there. And if you find it, focus on it, it can have the effect of making you more resistant to stress. Because if you acknowledge the good and see it, you can't tell yourself everything is bad, because it's not. Added benefit, it can improve your relationships. No one wants to be around someone who's always a gem. And I think you'll find you will improve aspects of your life beyond just your work or home if you focus on the good and are mindful of those things. Reframe and control how you react. I am a realist. I also have a temper. And no one makes me upset like I make me upset. And I have to be very definitive about not beating myself up. And I'll give you an example. My previous life, years and years ago, instructor training for the 860. I'm at the schoolhouse, and it was a day flight doing air refueling, and I'm blowing it. Blowing it. Screwed up left and right. And I got so angry with myself, I am screaming at myself without keying the mic. And in the 140 decibels of the helicopter, the flight engineers in the back could hear that I was screaming and hear the words. Now, do you think I was operating the aircraft well when I'm busy berating myself to the tune of 140 decibels? No. So I have to be purposeful about how I deal with it. Be objective about the event. That event, all right, you're screwing up. Is it the end of the world? No. There's an instructor there to help me solve my problems. If I fail the ride, is it the end of the world? No. I will get another ride and I will get more instruction. Reframe thoughts to be more productive. If I look at what I'm doing as I'm executing the maneuver, don't repeat that. It's not going to work twice if you do it wrong. Do something different. Pull out the difference in maneuver in that particular case. It's going to improve performance. I became an instructor. That ride didn't go well. Next one did, because I reframed. Next slide, please. Mindfulness. This sounds odd. Let me explain. It's just being deliberate about how you think. And the first, if something is going wrong, the situation does not, or is lousy. Pause. Just stop. Do nothing. For a short amount of time, just let your mind settle. Then think about what is important right now. I do this frequently every day. I have a long list of things to do. The priority of what is most important at any given time may not be obvious, so I have to stop. What is important right now? And I may shift what I'm doing in order to get that done. When calm, take purposeful action. Be action-oriented. Once you have decided what is truly important, maybe it's fixing a problem. Maybe it's dealing with one of the stressors. You know, be purposeful about how you deal with it. And what that allows me to do when I'm specifically being mindful, I can focus on what's important. I'm easily distracted. I love sidebars and meetings. If I start them, when I have to shut it off because, you know, that's not what's important right now. And I have to stay calm because if I get upset, my decision making is poor. Whatever I'm doing, my actions are poor. And I have to be mindful of that temper and the fact that I'm easily distracted. This is just 3 examples of several tools that are available. And this it got pulled off of airforceresilience.net. Next. There are many resources available for folks who are either thinking about harming themselves or are looking for ways to help someone that they are trying to help. Your wingman, the chain. Chaplains are always available. Even if Chaplain Landers isn't here, there is an on-call chaplain from the 19th available at any time. There are online military sources. I put a couple up there. What your chain of command can leverage, and I'm confident in saying this because I've heard General Scobie say this on more than one occasion. Let's say you're in military status, and it's an emergent situation, and I need to get you or someone into care right away. Even if I don't have a dime of money to put someone on orders, General Scobie says, get that information up the chain, and we will get that person taken care of. So the highest levels of Africa understand that this is important, and they will make resources available to help you or help one of your airmen. If you don't want to go the military route, I know people who have called National Suicide Hotline. It's useful. They need help. And it's been beneficial for people that I know. Next one. Before we go to Chief Wagner, I want to highlight that I moved through some of these topics pretty quickly because in terms of review and future, I want to cover those things quickly and then get back to work. The suicide prevention, I got through it pretty quickly. Please take that to heart. Know that you can make a difference, either by helping someone who needs it, by getting them to help if they need it, or by seeking that help yourself if you need it. Chief.
Good afternoon, everybody. A few quick points for me. For the last 17 months, our nation has gone through quite a lot. From a global pandemic, civil unrest, financial crisis, kind of bleeds over onto our military organization. Our group has gone through a lot. Your chain of command has changed. For the most part, we've seen 100% change in your senior leadership. Your work has had to change. You've gone from being able to come in for just about all the regular stuff throughout your career, and then we took that away. And you had to do the teleworking thing and try and get a hold of people that might be working from home. Your families have had to try and figure out how to be school teachers and work from home around the same dinner table. And one of the constants has been you. You stuck through it. And while we're not out of the woods yet, I do thank you for making it this far. I want to encourage you to keep going. Because what you do is important. And it's awesome. As we come out of this season with COVID and some of the other items that are impacting the nation, we're getting ready for summer. It's here. Great. Senior Master Sergeant Rohauer started sending out some info on being safe for summer. I'd encourage you, read through them. Take it to heart. If you're going to drink, don't drive. If you're going to drive, don't drink, and always have a plan. Make sure that you come back in one piece because we need you here. Again, on the note of moving forward for the future, I am heading up a team that's going to be looking at enlisted development. But I need your input, and I need a few volunteers. If you would like to take part in a group level activity to try and better the lives of those around you, shoot me an email, because I need you. If you have ideas, you have suggestions, you have concerns, you see a need within the group, funnel it my way. Because I think it would be pretty silly of me to try and build a program for your enlisted development and not even ask you what you want out of it. So please help me out with that. I want to close my comments with just basically two thoughts. What is it that you want moving forward? For the rest of this year, we got 6 months left on the calendar year. What do you want? What do you want for the rest of your tour at the 913? What are you looking for in your enlistment? What are you looking for in your career? Hold that thought for just a second. Because my next question is, what are you doing today to prepare for that? I think that this year has shown us that we're not invincible, that we have limitations. But I hope that it has also showed you that you are as capable of beating those situations and those limitations. Put your mind to it. Because we've done things this year that we've never even thought that we'd have to. So what do you want? And what are you doing today to prepare for that tomorrow? Ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure for me to be able to serve you. If there is anything that you need of me, let me know. This is a highlight of my career. I am enjoying every bit of it, and I ask that you keep me gainfully employed. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Last slide. I already brought this up. This is a good unit with a bright future. I've mentioned before, when I first came in, TDY a few times to see the unit before I took over, I could feel it right away. And I can't explain why or how, but you go somewhere and you can tell whether or not a unit's good or if the unit has problems. This unit's good. After I saw it, I knew this is where I was supposed to be. And that's why saying yes to come here was such a huge deal. It's an honor to be your commander. Just like Chief said, it's an honor to be your chief. Make yourselves ready. We can be mobilized at any time. I will talk about readiness at every opportunity because it's important. And whether it's making your medical appointments on time, whether it's doing a CBT off of your enlisted TFAT, whether it's getting SBIRT done or shooting, it's all important. Because if those things are always ready to go, when we get notified, go in 72 hours, or a week, or a month, or a year, we're ready. And it's not just that I care, Scobie cares, General Brown cares. Our readiness gets combined with the NAF, with AFRIC, it gets reported at the highest levels. So please do not miss it. It's extremely important. And I'll end with my two favorite phrases. Don't say that's not my job. Because the more we get done, the more you enable someone else to do more, the more successful we will be. I like the idea of everyone operating in the manner that I want the unit to operate. Where if someone needs help, we will help them. If we need help, they will help us, and we will get more done and be more effective. Lastly, don't fall back on that's the way we've always done it. It leads to mistakes, it leads to waste. Maybe you're doing something that no longer needs to be done. Maybe you're remembering a version of a TO from 10 years ago, or an AFI from 20 years ago. I know I do it. That's why I keep this in mind. So the question, the answer to why are you doing something shouldn't be, that's the way we've always done it. It should be, that's how the TO says it. So the AFI says it. So my commander says it. So please keep those things in mind. Thank you very much for coming today. Thank you for coming to the UTAs. I know it's difficult to work out a TR life and a civilian life with an employer and a family. And if you travel, it's even more difficult. I appreciate it every time, and that's why I love the UTAs. I enjoy making fun of the Dirty Dozen, but the truth is, the best part of the Dirty Dozen is the UTA right in the middle. Because that's when the unit comes together, we get more done. I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you.